Welcome to another edition of the Five Star Zone. I'm your host, Rico Beard, and here to talk everything Big Ten. This is a guy who I've known for some years, and you know what? He has been very accurate throughout the years that I've known him. So, without further ado, Brett Ciancia from Pick Six Preview, kind enough to join me today as we get ready to do a deep dive into the Big Ten because we are, I think, like 16, 17 days away from college football, Brett. It's here. I do not like to rush the summer, but you know what? It's time to turn that page and get into a little college football. And Brett, let's just go ahead and start. The Big Ten, well, it's an oxymoron kind of because it's no longer 10 teams. It's 18 teams. They're bringing in four teams from the Pac-12. I guess, when you look at the four teams coming in, which of those four teams you think is going to be a team that actually makes a difference in this year's Big Ten?
Yeah, well, thanks, Rico, for having me on our annual chat. Now it's probably been 5, 6 seasons. Best time of year. Everyone's undefeated. Everyone's optimistic. And this year with Pick Six Previews, it was really the season of change with the super conferences, the playoff tripling in size, and all the transfer portal activity. So to your question about the newcomers, I think Oregon's really well poised to contend right away for a Big Ten title. And I say that based off their talent acquisition, the only program in the country to stack top 10 high school recruiting classes the past 2 years and top 10 transfer hauls the last 2 years. So Dan Lanning getting it done. They're also built from the trenches out. I really like what they've done offensive line, defensive line wise. And the only question I had coming in was how they'd replace Bo Nix. I wake up the next morning, they signed Dylan Gabriel and Dante Moore, a former 5-star. So they're fully loaded. I think they're ready to contend.
Yeah, it was funny because it was like, wow. I guess when you think about it, you thought Dylan Gabriel was safe at Oklahoma, but it just shows you what the transfer portal is all about. That if you can give me a better deal, I'll take off and go to a better school. So yeah, when I look at Oregon, I'm like, man, it's almost like Dan Lanning has built this team for the Big Ten. They can run the ball because a lot of times when you think of, okay, well, West Coast team, they can't handle the weather, they can't handle the cold. I think Oregon's going to be okay, and I think that they're going to be just fine. What about those other teams, the Washingtons, USC's, and the UCLA coming in? Because when I look at those, the Huskies, well, Michael Penix Jr. is gone. That's not the same team. USC, I mean, when they finally get a defense that can stop anybody, call and let me know. And UCLA, I mean, if they're anything like Deshaun Foster's speech at the Big Ten Media Day, oh boy, it's going to be a long year for them.
Yeah, well, two of those three are transitional this year with new head coaches. You talked about UCLA, another one Washington with Saban retiring from Alabama. They plucked Kalen DeBoer out of there, and then the domino effect went into effect, and they stole Jed Fish from Arizona. But with Washington, fresh off a national title appearance, it's a completely new roster. Only 2 starters out of 22 are back at Washington. So total transition season. They also draw a really tough Big Ten schedule, a really tough welcome gift to the conference, the hardest conference draw. So I see a big step back this year. UCLA, same deal, a transitional type year. Their coordinator, Danton Lynn, hopped across town to USC and took 2 starters with him. So I think they're in for a rebuild on both sides of the ball. And USC, you're right about that. They're very one-dimensional recently. They're kind of the anti-Iowa, where with Iowa, you think of all defense, no offense. USC's been the inverse under Lincoln Riley. So to address that, he did fire Alex Grinch, their longtime defensive coordinator, and brought in Lynn, like I mentioned, but also Matt Entz, a North Dakota State head coach to coach linebackers, and Doug Belk, a Houston coordinator. So new minds on defense maybe could unlock some of that blue chip talent they have. But you know what you're getting on offense. It's going to be dynamic. Miller Moss is the QB this year. So they're probably the best boys out of those next 3 to break into the top 25.
All right, let's just go to the rest of the Big Ten. Who's the best team or the best teams in this upcoming Big Ten year? Because I think 6 came out in the AP preseason top 10 poll. Let's go down in order of from the best to, I guess, the worst teams in the Big Ten. But who's the best teams right now?
Yeah, well, I've got 3 teams from the Big Ten making the expanded playoff this year. I think the SEC will lead with 4, but the Big Ten will be close behind with 3. Ohio State's the team this year. There's no way around it. It's really a super team. They recruit at an elite clip, top 5 the last 5 years in high school recruiting. They sprinkled on some top transfers in the country like Caleb Downs, an All-American from Alabama. Quinshon Junkins, all SEC running back. They're fully loaded. One thing that stands out is the returning production is higher than usual, because at these dynasty tier programs like Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State, they're usually sending their guys to the pros after 3 short years. They cycle through a roster quicker, but they're all back in Columbus this year. And then the last bit is the intangible card, the motivational deal, because losing 3 straight years to Michigan, seeing Michigan hoist the national title last year, I think it's all the motivation possible for Ryan Day and his program. So I'm all in on Ohio State. I think it's the team this year from the Big Ten and a favorite to win the national title. So
hold on real quick, Brett, and talking with Brett Ciancia from Pick Six Preview here on the 5-Star Zone. Is this the year for Ryan Day because of what happened in the previous 3 years, that if for some reason they do not beat, because I said if they don't beat Michigan, he has to win the national title to keep his job, because it's a different breed of animal in Columbus. Like, most teams would love to have the success of the Buckeyes, but it's not deemed success if you're not beating Michigan, or as they like to call the team up north.
Yeah, it's a different grading scale amongst Buckeye fans and boosters and alumni. It's really, if they were to go 11-1 and lose to, say, Penn State or Minnesota or Purdue, you wouldn't bat an eye at it. But 11-1 with the loss to Michigan, that's a whole different script. So to do it 3 straight years, this would be the 4th straight loss. I don't think he can overcome that. You're right. It would have to be hoisting a national title trophy. Anything short of that is deemed a failure there. And I know other fan bases will laugh, but that's just the context that they have at Ohio State. You got to beat Michigan. So, and it's interesting, the 2 guys that dominated Michigan, Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel, they both came out with quotes, unprovoked, about how talented this roster is. Most talented locker room they've ever seen at Ohio State. So a lot of pressure. You have the former coaches chiming in that this is a really special unit. They got to go get it done.
All right, so back to the other teams that you have in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, Oregon, we touched on a little bit. It's just a really strong offensive line, defensive line play, a strong defense. I think to Michigan State fans and Big Ten fans that might think of the old Oregon, a flashy, gadgety offense with speed. It's not that anymore. It's really built from the inside out. It's a really physical roster. So I think they're poised to come in and contend. In 3rd place, I have Penn State. And I think that, they're usually 10-2, 9-3. But now that 10-2 puts them into an expanded playoff bracket. So they're going to really benefit from a bigger bracket. My number 1 defense statistically last year brings back 7 starters. I know they lose their trio of corners. That's going to hurt. But they reloaded a coordinator with Tom Allen, former Indiana head coach. And the key to Penn State, though, is on the offensive side. I really like their coordinator hire of Andy Kotelnicki from Kansas, guy who went out there and with 2 stars and walk-ons turned Kansas into a dynamic offense. So I think you're going to see that here with 5 stars all over the place. I think Penn State's going to push into the playoff bracket.
Well, it's funny because the knock on Penn State, and especially James Franklin, is they're good at beating the bottom teams. But when they go up against the top teams, it's not the same Penn State team. So does the schedule favor Penn State that you think it will catapult them into the playoffs?
Yeah, definitely a schedule boost. The only top team they face out of the Big Ten is Ohio State. So even if they chalk that up as a loss, I think they'll be favored in 10 or 11 other games. So, and it's all about that size of the bracket, because 10-2, I'm actually based here in Pennsylvania. 10-2, these Penn Staters are upset with it. They want to finally break through to the national stage. But funny thing is, now 10-2 is probably a lock for the expanded bracket. So if they just stay the status quo, they look like a playoff team.
All right, so you got Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State in the initial college football playoffs. You said 4 SEC teams. So a couple of teams that you did not include, especially one, is the defending national champion, the Michigan Wolverines. So why Michigan not in the playoffs?
Yeah, so I've got Michigan 12th, and with the way the new bracket works, you have 4 automatic bids, a 5th auto bid to the non-AQ champion, meaning the next 7 at-large teams will get the bids. So that cuts off right around number 11. So having Michigan 12th, that means they're the first team out of the bracket. But I see a step back here. You're talking 10 starters gone off that offense. Only Colston Loveland is back at tight end. Still a quarterback debate or controversy going into the fall camp here. 5 guys are contending. Head coaching change. You have all the off-season, off-field drama still going on, still brewing over there. I think that it was a really special team last year, one of the most dominant in Big Ten history, but due for a little bit of a step back, a transition. And then the last key is that offensive line. That has been so strong for them. They won back-to-back Joe Moore awards for the best line. But not only 5 starters, their 6th guy also has gone. So it's a total rebuild on offense. So yeah, I see them tripping up a couple times, probably going 9-3, and that's going to be on the other side of that bracket now, being cut out of it.
Well, Brett, it's funny because at least here, there's a lot of Michigan fans concerned the fact that we're getting close to the season and they're really rolling out five QBs in practice, and we don't know who the quarterback is going to be. And trust me, I've seen it where if you pick the right quarterback, man, it works. But if you pick the wrong quarterback, you got to go through some games, and Texas is looming right there in game number 2. Like, how quickly do you think they find out who their quarterback is going to be for this season?
Yeah, usually you don't have that luxury where you can play multiple guys throughout September. They got to pick a guy by week 2 with Texas, a defending playoff team themselves and a projected favorite to make it back. So, yeah, they have to figure it out quickly. I know Orgy might be the favorite, or at least he got a lot of playing time last year and a lot of running scenarios. We'll see, though. I've seen as many as 5 names thrown in there. So, we'll see what they go with. I think it's going to be a distraction. And, yeah, it's a really talented defense. I don't want to cut them too short. I think the defense is loaded, top 10 unit nationally, multiple All-American guys, probably the best corner in the country with Will Johnson, Kenneth Grant there, Mason Graham. So I really like the defense. They upgraded at linebacker through the portal with 2 of the top linebacker transfers coming in, Houseman from Nebraska, Barham from Maryland. So a lot to like still. I don't want to, fully sell them, but I think in a crowded Big Ten, they're going to be 4th in the top 3 making.
No, and then anybody who watches this knows I'm a Michigan State fan, but there is one Wolverine that I do root for, and it's Will Johnson because Brett, I've known him since he was a little kid. I've known his father, Deion Johnson, who formerly played at Michigan. So I've watched him grow up and turn into the young man that he is now. He's the one Wolverine I'll always root for. Okay, I said it. I got it out the way. We'll move on. Who are some disappointments? Some teams that you think are going to take a step back in the Big Ten?
Yeah, well, maybe Wisconsin, but we talked about some of the newcomers taking a step back. It's all relative because they're coming into a new league. But UCLA to me is a big step back, and Washington. We touched on them earlier, but UCLA under Chip Kelly, they were always stacking top rushing offenses, top 20 every year. My game grader under Chip Kelly the last 4 years. I think they're going to seriously step back. You had the late coaching change there in late February, where Kelly went over to Ohio State to take a coordinator job. They hired from within and lost some key personnel on defense. Latu was an All-American. I think he won the Lombardi Award. He got drafted. 2 starters in the secondary followed Danton Lynn across town to USC. So it's a total mess right now. I think that they're in for a big step back. And Washington, we touched on a little. I'll hit it again, but 20 starters gone off of a national title contending team. All 11 on offense. So everything you loved about Washington last year, Penix, the first-round receivers, the big offensive line, the dynamic vertical passing, it's all gone. It's just completely new. So whenever you have that much roster turnover, it's always a question mark. And I talked schedule. They got the toughest Big Ten schedule draw, so there aren't many favors there. Bowl season would be a big win for Jed Fish. It kind of reminds me of the 2022 TCU team under Max Duggan, who they made that great run out of nowhere to the national title game and then had a big bounce back, a correction the next year. It looks like that for Washington this year for me.
Okay. What about teams like Iowa? Iowa finally realized, oh, wait, if we score points, we can win games. I mean, I think the craziest stat is the fact that last year, they scored 14 touchdowns offensively.
Yeah.
14. Think about that. That's a little over a touchdown a game, like fraction over. How does this team improve? They finally fired their offensive coordinator. They have a lights out defense, one of the best defenses in the nation. I mean, that's how they were winning games, literally winning like 10-9. If you bet the under, I cleaned up last year, but that's a whole different podcast. Does Iowa make that step forward with the new offensive coordinator and new offense with and K. McNamara?
Yeah, well, some change on offense. I like when Kirk Ferentz is asked about his points per game, his yards per game. He gets so tired of it. He says, hey, I'm good at wins per game. I know how to win a ball game. And he does it with defense, special teams. Phil Parker, their coordinator, cleaned up the whole coordinator circuit, all the awards. It was well-deserved. And a lot of that is back. Their swarm NIL this year was able to defend a lot of their starters from the portal and the pros. So aside from Cooper DeJean, I think everyone's back on defense. 4 guys landed on my All-American preseason team on defense. Could be the best linebacker duo in the country. It's fully loaded. So you have the defense. Offensively, can they scrape anything out of this unit? And I think they're due for some bonuses this year. First, the coordinator change with Tim Lester coming in. He built some good MAC offenses over the past decade. You get Power 5 quarterback play for once because Cade McNamara is healthy, and Sullivan transferred in from Northwestern, where he started there in the Big Ten. So 2 former Big Ten starters. And then the offensive line, they struggled a lot last year. Bottom 5 in my numbers, but they're at least veteran. They bring four starters back in the trenches, so due for some gains there. So I think they make a big step forward. They were my best bet of the preseason with the win total. It was 7.5, and I really like that number. I think it's grown to 8 or 8.5. I would still take it based on the schedule. I mean, it's a really favorable schedule. They'll lose to Ohio State, but the other 10 or 11, they could be favored. Really like Iowa this year.
And you had mentioned that Wisconsin was a team that you thought maybe would take a step back because not your typical Badger team. It's not the ground and pound type of team. No, they're trying to go like some air raid in Madison, which is I don't think the fans are going to be ready to see that. So why Wisconsin taking that step back?
Yeah, well, I really like Phil Longo, their offensive coordinator, who you mentioned. I get to talk to him every preseason. Offensive genius. It's quite a transition to go from Wisconsin, their old 90s, 2000s, big running attack, to this spread aerial assault. So transitional there. Their defense took a step back. First time in a long time. They were consistently top 15, top 25 in my numbers all the way under Jim Leonard, even before him. Last year, took a slide out of that top 25 first time. So, it's tough losing the Big Ten West because schedule-wise, it's now a lot harder for these teams. Their path to Indianapolis got a lot harder, them and Iowa both. So I think they might take a step back in the win-loss column, despite maybe some gains statistically.
Yeah, it is funny. Now, there's a team out there that I think is a team that nobody is talking about, but talking about the scheduling for the Big Ten, they were if Washington got the worst schedule, this team was gifted the best schedule. Now they're coming in with a freshman QB, but he's Mr. Everything. I look at the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Brett, when you look at their schedule, I think they have Ohio State, and that's it. Like they should win a bunch of games, and I think that they are a sneaky good team that could actually find their way. Late November, we're going to be talking to are the Nebraska Cornhuskers really a team that can make it to the college football playoffs?
Yeah, a lot here with Nebraska. 2 big offseason moves that they made. One was to keep Tony White, the defensive coordinator, in Lincoln, and he built a top 10 defense last year in the transitional year. It was the first time they looked like the black shirts in quite a long time, but with UCLA head coaching job opened up, that's his alma mater. He definitely could have gone over there and taken that, but Matt Rule retained him. That was huge. Secondly, he hit on it, bringing in Dylan Raiola, the 5-star quarterback, a legacy kid, and was flipped from Georgia. But that was their position of need, was quarterback. It was some of the worst quarterback play I saw all 2023. They led the nation in turnovers, worst turnover margin, worst kicking percentage, all the metrics. It was terrible. But to just plug the quarterback spot with 5-star talent, I think is huge. I watched their spring game. I know it's just a spring game, but he was hitting every throw in the field, the vertical ball, touch passes to the corner of the end zone, quick shots. So I think he's going to be fine there. And lastly, schedule. You touched on this too. And if you look at it, it's probably the most unbalanced beginning and second half schedule where they could be favored the first 7 games. And this is coming off 5 losing years, but they're probably going to be favored in the first 7. Even if they go 6-1, I think they're set up for a bowl. Ohio State's probably a loss, but they host UCLA, a transition team. They host Wisconsin, what could be a coin flip game, and then the road trip to Iowa. But they could definitely be sitting there 8-9 wins come end of the year, and it would be a huge year 2 for Matt Rule, a true program builder. So we'll see.
Yeah, talking with Brett Ciancia from Pick Six Preview here on the 5-Star Zone. All right, Brett. Well, all right. Let's just jump into it. Give me the bad news. Tell me about my Spartans. Can we rise up from the debacle that was last year? Because you do a great job in kind of predicting the season. I don't think anybody had on their bingo card, coach loses his job because of some shenanigans in a hotel room in Florida. Team just spirals down. They lose. I think when I last checked, there's going to be 62 or 63 brand new players, and that includes the incoming freshmen on the team. it's like no one knows what this team is. So I figured if anybody knows, maybe you would know, a fresh pair of eyes. Bringing in Aiden Childs, he's only had 53 snaps under center, but he was one of the top transfer quarterbacks coming out of the portal. Jonathan Smith leaving Oregon State. What should Spartan fans expect to see from this Michigan State team this year?
Yeah, well, I think it hit.
And you don't have to spare my feelings.
No, yeah, for real. I think it hit rock bottom last year, and it was breakdowns on both sides of the ball. Against Washington, they gave up 730 yards, worse than Spartan history. And then offensively against Penn State, they only gained 50 yards. It was the worst offensive performance in Spartan history. Worst rushing attack in Spartan history. You can go on and on. I'm sure that, Spartan fans already lived it last year. I don't have to rehash how rough it was. But I think that they have more talent in the room than showed on paper. It could be one of those broken locker room deals last year. If there are veteran in one area, it's defensively, bringing back more than half of the two deep coming back defensively. That's going to have to be relied on big time in the transition year. But I'm one of those East Coast sickos that stays up till 2 a.m. watching the Pac-12 finish up, and I really grew fond of Jonathan Smith's style out there. And in a state where they were overshadowed by a bigger rival, a big spender rival, Oregon, he was able to grind out 8, 9, 10 wins with a really physical style. I mean, it was great offensive lines, and to bring over Mahalchik, his offensive line to Michigan State is huge. He's one of the best in the game. So you're going to see that mentality, that physicality built. It might take a couple seasons, but I really like it. Childs was a huge win. Number 2 transfer quarterback he touched on, 5-star guy. So a lot to like. It might be a tough transition season, but I think long-term, intermediate term, it's the right hire. It was a steal pulling him out of Oregon State, his alma mater. And I think they did well in this coaching carousel. It might not be the flashiest style, but as he puts it, low ego, high output. That's his big mantra. And I think you're going to see that in a couple seasons.
See, I like how Brett just really kind of spared my feelings. He didn't say this team's going to suck this year. Don't expect, like, can I at least, do you think this team could be eligible for a bowl? Could they get to 6 wins?
Yeah, I'm not just saying it because I'm on with Rico, but schedule-wise, a nice boost. One of the swing games is going to be that trip to Boston College. I think if you win that, that sets up pretty well because in the conference, they draw my 3 worst projected teams. They get Indiana, Purdue, and Illinois. So I have Michigan State 13th in the book this year in the Big Ten, and they'd be favored against those 3 bottom teams in the Big Ten. So take care of non-conference, win when you're supposed to. I think you can get to 6 wins.
And there's another team on there that I guess that you did not mention, but I've had this conversation with my radio partner, Mike Valeni. He's really big on Rutgers. And I guess I look at Rutgers and I just see Rutgers. Is Rutgers a surprise team this year?
Yeah, for 2 reasons, their defense and their schedule. And I know we keep talking schedule. I'm sure listeners might be tired of it, but without divisions and an 18-team conference, all scattered schedules, I had to make a huge, grid here and write down who's playing who and really look at it visually because there are so many imbalances. Washington draws 7 of the top 8. Rutgers draws 0 of the top 8. So they can coast by on a really easy schedule, get to 7, 8 wins, and set up probably their best team in Rutgers history, in Big Ten history for them in the last 11 seasons. But Greg Schiano back in New Jersey. He's built it again. It's a really physical defense. I think 8 starters back defensively, something like that. Their running back, Kyle Monangai, could push for 1,000 yards. He's really the battery of that offense. It could be a team that they might not be the strongest, but schedule-wise and good defense and good run game, that could grind out 7, 8, 9 wins.
All right, Brett. Before I let you go, who are your initial teams that you think are going to make the college football playoffs?
Yeah, well, playoff expansion this year. What's new is the 4 conference champions get the automatic bids and the bye weeks too. Then the non-AQ champ gets picked, and then 7 at-larges. So with that framework, I have Georgia out of the SEC, Ohio State from the Big Ten. I picked Utah out of a crowded Big 12. And then a shock pick, Miami, to win the ACC. I hope I'm not regretting that one. They've been underwhelming the last decade or two. But so those are my 4 conference.
Is Crystal Ball still their coach?
Yes.
Okay, then I can't ever pick Miami because they find ways to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat.
They will learn how to take a knee in victory formation this year. I know it. The 3rd time's the charm. They blew it twice, but I love the talent. But So those are the 4 conference winners. From there, at larges, I have Penn State, I have Notre Dame, Florida State, Ole Miss, Alabama, Oregon, Texas, and then Boise as my non-AQ champion. Now, if all that holds, we're in for a really special first weekend because those games are on college campuses. So if my bracket holds, you'd have a game in the Grove in Oxford, Mississippi, the best tailgating atmosphere. You'd have a game in South Bend, all the history at Notre Dame. Oregon would host and have to see Alabama head north in December to play a football game. That'd be pretty cool. And then Texas hosting Boise State in basically a David Goliath type matchup. So we'll see. I think we're in for some exciting matchups, more teams involved than ever. Some new faces in the bracket will be nice. So it's going to be a special season.
And you know what? Since I have you here, does Alabama take a step back, Kalen DeBoer? I mean, because he's not Nick Saban. I think the worst job you ever want is to replace the man. You want to be the man who replaces the man who replaced the man. Can Alabama keep this thing going? And how quickly do you think Bama fans will turn if it doesn't?
Yeah, I think you'll see a little slide down. Now, I say that within context of they were one of the few dynasty tier teams I talk about, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State. They're really the dynasty level. I think they may slide out of that pack just because they're going to have some more struggles in the super recruiting battles. You know what I mean? They call it the Saban discount, where some players might take a lesser NIL deal to play for Saban. Now that's gone. You have big spenders coming in, and they might slide a little bit. I don't see them falling out of the top 10. I think it's too talented of a roster and a program. Kalen DeBoer is a proven head coach now, getting it done at Washington, at the D2 level. Everywhere he's been great offense. So I don't think it'd be wise to write him completely off, but I have them fourth in the SEC, 9th overall. They're no longer that team you pencil in at number 1 every year.
Right, but if Kalen DeBoer can fix the quarterback, I think that he truly will become that quarterback whisperer because he's done that. His success, he's had one constant. It was Michael Penix Jr. Let's see what he can do with a quarterback not named Michael Penix Jr. That's my thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Milroe himself was a Heisman candidate last year, but more of a dual threat. We'll see how his offense comes in. But right when you think they're losing all their star players, you look on paper, it's 5 stars everywhere still. It's top 100 recruits. So they're fully stacked, and I think they're going to contend, but not at that dynasty level anymore.
Hey, Brett, let people know how they can get Pick 6 Preview.
Yeah, thanks so much. Pick6previews.com, Pick6 Previews on Twitter. It's the annual preview magazine this year. We have the hard copy back, 3rd year for the hard copy, 13th annual overall edition. So, and I say that it's the season of change. We talked about it all throughout the show, but really help you get caught up with all the transfers. I have all transfer teams in the book, tracking all the player movement, coaching carousel, playoff expansion, conference realignment. It's all in there. So give us a look. Sample pages are on there. Testimonials from the college game day guys and Scott Van Pelt. They're all on there. Pick6previews.com.
So, guys, make sure you go support Brett. Pick 6 Preview. I'm telling you, it is accurate. You see other magazines out there. This man puts in the work. He knows what he's doing. We're going to grow this brand, and we're going to get him up there with the big boys because he's better. He's more accurate. I said,
Thank you.
What else you want me to say? I have never led you wrong. Go download a copy of this. Pick up a copy of Pick 6 Preview. Brett, appreciate your time for coming on and great insight on the Big Ten. And I'll bookmark this and just see once again how accurate you are because you normally are pretty accurate. So, yeah, hopefully MSU can do a little bit better. And for my own sanity, I just can't take another year like it was last year. But appreciate you coming on, Brett.
Yeah, thank you, Rico. Anytime. Appreciate it.
All right. Hey, guys, keep liking, watching, subscribing. Tell your friends. You've been watching the 5 Star Zone.